Welcome to Kick It Up a Notch, hosted by Megan and Jenny. We're here to bring you lively conversations, inspiring stories, and a little bit of everything in between. Whether it's life, business, or just a good laugh, we're turning up the energy and diving into what makes life extraordinary. Let's kick it up a notch. Welcome to another episode of Kick It Up a Notch. I'm Megan Thomas, and I am here back with my amazing co-host, Jenny McBride. We are the best realtors here in Evansville, Indiana. We are also entrepreneurs and all-around pretty fun gals. We're so glad to have you back for another episode, and make sure to check out our last episodes and follow, like, and subscribe.
Today, we're kicking it up a notch with Jill Cannon, a single mama whose journey of authenticity, integrity, and resilience has shaped her passion for helping others. Jill is a certified health coach, sleep, stress management, and recovery coach, and an RN.
So as being a single mom now has had a huge influence on your values and your lifestyle, how has that experience impacted like your approach to stress management and finding balance in your life, since you are someone who teaches those things?
Yeah.
How do you practice those things?
Oh gosh. It is a daily kind of minute by minute practice, if I'm being honest. I think as a mom, it really made me aware, first of all, that I really struggled because prior to having kids, I don't know that I was really aware that I had mental health struggles. Genetically, I'm inclined to have it, but I just didn't recognize things in myself that I saw in some family members or didn't struggle on the same level. And I realized when I had my first, that I really actually had dealt with this my whole life in a high functioning way. So high functioning anxiety and depression for me, that just looked a little bit different. I was always able to manage it through sports. I prefer contact sports. So just certain things that help me manage it. And when those things were taken from me, when I had my daughter, who was a cluster feeder, which I don't know if you know about cluster feeding when you breastfeed, but I had this expectation that she would feed at certain times. Cluster feeders, there's no rhyme or rhythm or reason to any of it. And so she was attached to me a ton. I didn't get more than 2 hours of sleep until she was 2. I was trying to still play roller derby, and I had so much identity in myself as a roller derby player at the time, and also as someone who thought, hey, I'm going to be great at this mom thing, because I've been, at that time, I was doing first steps. I was doing home visits with moms, but wasn't a mom yet. And I thought I expertly just knew what that was going to be like and feel like, because I had been doing that for, I think at that time, about 12 years. So I identified with that. I thought I was, yeah, I'm an early childhood expert. I know what to do. And so when I had her, all of how I identified previously was gone, and all of my coping mechanisms were gone. Like I said, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't work out in the same way. I couldn't usually get to practice. I couldn't really even get away from her. I couldn't get alone time, anything to recover. So when that happened, I really realized, like, oh, wow, it's not that I don't struggle with this. It's that the coping mechanisms that have always allowed me to struggle and seemingly show up as if I don't struggle, they're gone. And I'm having a real hard time. So with her, it was more anxiety. With my second, it was, honestly, looking back, probably more, it was both anxiety and depression, but it was more psychosis. It was dangerous. It was really scary. And then, you add in other parts of life that are hard in marriage and just life in general. And so that part, I think, to answer your question, going through that, I think, is what even made me aware, first of all, that something's up and I don't know what it is and I don't know how to tackle it. And so starting to tackle it little by little by little. And then as I started to share it, because at the time I was just sharing as realistically as I could, once I got to a point where I felt safe to do so on Facebook, and I had a number of people resonate, empathize. I've been there, right? And so I really started to realize, oh, wow, if I'm actually more authentic and genuine and not trying to hide like this part that feels scary to hide, right? Because we're Gen
Mhm.
Xers. We don't talk about these things, or we weren't brought up to where we feel like we should be strong enough to handle it. And I realized when I was sharing, it was affecting people. So maybe that is really where that shift happened, to where I started to understand like there's something to this suffering, and there has to be purpose. And then it's just been tiny steps along the way to get me to hear other struggles, lots of different things.
I think that one of the things you said was some people may be dealing with the same thing, not only, uh, before kids, there was the depression, the anxiety, things like that. But also after having kids, you have that postpartum. And so and the hormonal changes and everything. So it's just like double compounds those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So
The hormone change, absolutely, because I think that's something people are aware of. You have a baby, your hormones change. But you mentioned a part where the coping mechanisms, whether you were aware of them or not, you had that physical outlet, you didn't have someone constantly on you, relying on you. Those coping mechanisms are, not only if they're gone, they're significantly changed. So moms who are like, I have this baby, I should be so happy, are fighting hormones and fighting their daily lives are different. Their sleep is different. This perfect storm of unpleasantness that you have to turn around and smile because you have this beautiful baby that you love and cherish, are so grateful for, and might not know how to process what is happening to you as a woman. And it's a big life change. So that was a really interesting part you brought up, that your coping mechanisms change, and maybe some things you knew you had before, didn't know you had before, are showing themselves now after such a significant thing as childbirth.
To piggyback off of one thing I heard you say, because it hit me, like I felt when you say I should, right? And that was a big feeling at the time. Like I did not share much about my first baby because of how, oh, I might get emotional, but how hard it was. And because I had worked in early childhood and worked with moms for so many years, that should feeling like I should feel like this, or I should not feel like this. I should want to share. A lot of that also, I will say, in terms of social media, I'm an older mom, but I did have some friends who were having baby at the same time and sharing, um, what I thought I should be sharing, these joyful moments, this I'm so excited. And in reality, I was like, this sucks. I mean, I really did not enjoy being a mom. And it took some close friends to say, like, listen, that's normal, right? What everyone's posting is not total reality. And it was when people finally got to the point where they were like, that was actually a hard time looking back, is when I started to feel safe. Like, okay, I was just assuming from what they were sharing that they were not also struggling. And so that was a tricky place of like, that should, like, I'm sure you guys have heard, like, don't should all over
Yeah.
yourself. But that was a big piece of, I think, what was contributing to some of how I was feeling and to why I didn't want to share authentically, along with some other things in life. But yeah, that
I
word stood out to me.
absolutely love when women share, people, not just women, share their struggles, because that vulnerability, the double-edged sword of it is people are going to share their opinions and their comments, but to have that person who's been hiding and been scared and feeling the same way see someone else share that, go, oh my gosh, I'm feeling that way too, I'm not alone, I'm mad my baby won't stop crying, or I don't love being a mom every second of the day. That is okay to share that and feel that you're a human. So I think finding that
Well,
community and
and I
knowing you're
think
not
it's
alone.
so easy to look at social media and everybody's world is perfect.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. It's easy to judge, and I've caught myself sometimes that I couldn't judge a mom or a parent, because it's like I can't imagine the situations that that they are in and everything.
Okay. Let's talk about your personal coaching business, Deeper Health Coaching.
Yeah.
So I know that you have a passion, obviously, for helping women manage their stress and recover from burnout and things like that. So, I mean, what do you feel like for women is the most common stressors, I guess, that
Mhm.
and how you help them go through the change that they need?
I think women deal with more than men is that it was said today in our class, I have all these tabs open all at the same time. So I think women's brains are naturally wired to like just they constantly go. We're more emotional creatures usually. Um, on the flip side, I think men have a different ability to kind of one thing at a time. So if I had to answer that question, and this isn't science based, this is just opinion based. I think that women more often deal with overload and overwhelm because they don't have as much ability to shut down a tab. It's too many,
Mhm.
like, it's just too many things going at one time. That's a stereotype.
They're the nurturers. They're taking care of their partner, and that could, in many different ways, they could be doing that. They're taking care of the children in the household. Nowadays, they're also going to work. I think they're stronger in that sense. They can handle more things at one time, but unfortunately, the thing that comes last is them. I hear so many moms say, I bought this, and this for someone else. I haven't bought something for myself in forever because it's either those fields of guilt or others before me. And I do just think, I don't know if it is a genetically wired thing. I don't know if it was passed down, from back in the day when men were to hunt and find food and the women kind of took care of everything else, or what it is. But I think that is very common. A lot of households would see that. They just take on more and are able to do it. You always hear that joke of when a woman has the flu, life goes on. When a man has the flu, the world stops.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all hear that, they get sniffles and the woman's like, oh my God, this is going to be 3 days of torture for me because they have the sniffles. So I don't know if it's an assumption thing, but I think you do see that very
I mean,
commonly.
all of
Women
that is true in my house.
can
So,
multitask. And we'll just let everyone know, you were talking about having another adult in the room. Jenny works 2 feet from her husband all day, every day. So we'd love to go into a different topic one day about how we feel about working with your partners and the stress management that causes. You don't get to escape the workspace and then home space.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. But no, I do. I think that's interesting to dive into, is that women are nurturers. They can multitask, and we all know multitasking usually doesn't end well. And then, of course, women are fighting all these things. Did I do it good enough? Do my kids love me? I'm not staying in shape. I didn't do my hair today. All that stuff, just so many extra challenges. And of course, we can only speak for women because we are women. Men, I know, have their own different specific stressors and battles. So you see women dealing with these things. What do you think is the best release you've seen people work through? What do you think the best break for them is? How do you see them working through that stress, anxiety, and burnout?
I think that's highly individualized.
Okay.
I think, you have to figure out each person when I coach. It's a process of figuring out like what's standing out, right? Like what kind of brings you here and what stands out when you think about your overall health and wellness. With you guys, the last time we kind of went through that, all those dimensions. And usually people can identify like this is where it's hardest. And then figuring out from there, like what are the things that would be meaningful in terms of making some change, but also what's doable given the realities of your life in this moment on this day. Because I find when I coach people, that should voice comes in like, well, I should be working out, or I
Mhm.
should be eating differently, or I should be, name it, right? I recognize that I'm overstimulated all day and multitasking. I should take a break, but I don't know how to do that. So it really is based on, I think, where someone's struggling with their wellness, and then what even is helpful for them and what's doable, right? So if it could be really different for like a mom that's working at home because she's a stay-at-home mom, or a mom that's actually working outside of the home, or even a mom that works remotely and takes care of her kids, what's meaningful to them. And I always coach people like, what's the one baby step that's going to improve you by 1% in a week, in a month, because those baby steps are really where the magic starts to happen, and you build on those as you go, and eventually you look back and you're like, wow, I came a long way.
Yeah. Everyone they talk, I think there has to be like big goals and giant steps. They're not doing anything. We really underestimate the importance of those little steps that get you there.
That just like reminded me of like even in work, like we say, what if we get overloaded in work? We say, what are we doing that we could quit and nobody would notice? Okay. So I think that could even be within having all those tabs open, because we as women, we tend to want to do all these things, but we could be doing something that doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And what are those things that don't matter that we could quit? And then I was sitting here thinking, okay, what are some of the things that we aren't doing that people are noticing? And it could be something like, I'm putting on weight. Not that we care what people think, but it's just like, we're not taking care of ourselves. And people are noticing that's what I mean. Not that, I was just trying to think of an example, or my hair's looking like crap, or I'm not taking care of myself. So those two things kind of came to my mind, like what can we quit doing that nobody would notice? And then what are people noticing that maybe we should be doing?
Yeah, that's very valid, because in terms of making change process and how it works, sometime for some people, stopping something is the easiest first step, and for other people, adding something. And so that's a valid point. It really depends. For some people that want to eat better, it's harder for them to cut things out of their diet versus like, let's add one more vegetable before we cut, so that they start. So like there's value to what you said in terms of how people change, and it's highly individualized. And that's, I think, from a coaching standpoint, where things can get tricky. And what I'm always making sure I'm being mindful too as a coach is making sure it's really you are the expert on yourself, on your life, on what's going to work. I'm there to kind of hold your hand and help you see yourself and hear yourself. It is not my job to tell you what to do. And so coaching typically is a deep dive, a lot of questions, so that your brain starts to come up with it, right? Helping people figure out what's actually going to work for them and what's even meaningful. Where's our starting point?
Love letting them stay in control of their life and themselves, or them kind of learning that through coaching, that they are in control of that life and selves, and what is like that first step they can do to get there. And back to what Jenny was saying is, what are we doing? It might be coming down to the conversation and communicating. Like, honey, do you care that the table is set with matching plateware every night before dinner? That might not be something they even notice, but the woman doing it might think family loves this. This is what means family dinner. You talk with your family and they're like, Mom, we would be fine if we sat on the living room floor in a circle and talked about our day. We don't have to with paper plates. Like, but she's shooting in her mind that the table should be set and everything should look perfect, and communicating with your family. Because how many times has a husband said to a wife, hey, I can see your roots showing. And in the man's mind, that might be, usually you're very happy when you go to the hair place. That's not happened in a while. Like, I could so see that happening. And it's like Mars and Venus, men and women talking sometimes, but that might be his way of saying, hey, I notice you are not doing something you usually do, and that brings you joy. What's going on? Well, that's because I just ironed everyone's clothes. And it's like, well, that kind of makes things staticky, and we don't like that anyway. And they were more upset to say that than, oh, I can see your roots, So it's the communication. I would, with my partner, there's be certain things where I would just like go off the handle and he'd say something. And then I've learned over time together, that's his way of saying, something that I don't need to take that way. That's not what he means by it. So communication, I know, is very hard, especially when you're struggling with something so sensitive like we've been talking about. But I think what Jenny mentioned, that's so good to say, like, what are all the things I'm doing? And then ask people, is it because I think I should be doing this and I'm putting more on myself, which I need to take accountability for?
Mhm.
Or, are the people I'm doing this for, they benefiting from it? Do they even really like it? And can it free up more time for us together or more time for myself? So
And I think with coaching, Jill, because I've had a coach many times in my life, but I think, and again, as a woman, I think sometimes we need that validation too, because a lot of times we know what we need to be doing,
Mhm.
mhm.
but we need somebody to
Mhm.
confirm that, and that's kind of what you help bring the light, but also
Yeah.
validate that they want that validation that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's super. I feel like you might as well just be the coach. Knowing and doing are absolutely not the same thing. And
Yeah.
again, that's where that should voice comes in. And a lot of times, those are the things that actually hold people back from the change being sustainable. People having in their mind, like, it should look like this. I know what to do. I'm going to do it. Well, if you're not within a scope of what's actually doable, then you have this guilt and this, I failed, and you keep
Oh, yeah.
failing. But it's having those small wins. Like you mentioned, Megan, a lot of it does have to do, you mentioned communication. But to me, I also heard like intentionality. Like we
Mhm.
need to have these intentional talks with whoever it is, if it's a coach, if it's a partner, friends, whoever supports you in your life, because it's through that intentionality. And I think the key is, what is actually at the core here?
Mhm.
What is important? What are those values? That why is setting the table so important? And if it has to do with, well, family is a
Mhm.
core value and beauty is a core value, okay, then can your partner understand the why behind it? And then it becomes easier to allow, or vice versa. Like, okay, I see you now. I understand what this is about. So how can we create change where you still feel like you're meeting this core value for yourself and for our family, or for you and your partner, or whoever's in your life, um, and not having to let go? Because it's when you start to let go of those things. Anytime when I've felt like I should do something and it should look like this, and I let go of like the actual reason it's important to me, I lose myself. And then
Mhm.
I'm a hot mess. And there is no change.
Yeah.
That's when the mental health starts to come in for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think normalizing a support group saying, "You got out of bed today, and that's your win for the day." Just because, again, going back to everything we've talked about, summarizing like the baby steps, the support system, what's important to you, mental health, the burnout. Some days your win looks very, very different than everyone else's win for the day. I'm
Yeah.
looking at this person who just, did something what I feel like is extraordinary, and I did, very little today. But when you look at your internal world and being in charge of yourself and your focus, that little thing you're saying is little today is a huge thing compared to what you did yesterday.
Sure.
And that's why I like that you said every journey is so individualized. And unfortunately, we are in such a comparison world.
Mhm.
And like Jenny mentioned, so much of what we're comparing to is not the reality of it,
Yeah.
which I think is so significant on mental health today because we are reaching for something that just is too big of a step for us. We need to take a smaller one to get there, and isn't real anyway. So, Jill, you had mentioned talking to us before that growing up watching your mom build her own successful business. So,
Yeah.
what lessons did you experience about teaching you about ambition and stress and
Yeah.
fulfillment and balancing all those things? And did it look different once you became a mom, or how did that kind of guide your journey?
It was super valuable having a woman who was my mom, like not just in my life, but was primary in my life, set the example for being driven and working towards a goal. She actually owned a couple of different businesses. Watching her really work towards owning
Absolutely.
so getting to see all of that, you learn the importance of failing forward, of growing, of really I got to see a lot of the stress that came with it. I got to see her work through some really hard things. There was some imbalance, right? So I understood, like, wow, being a female business owner specifically, she's trying to balance my dad, us, our schedules, because she owned those businesses when we were maybe end of middle school, beginning of high school. We also worked in the basement, and then I worked for my mom. We got a lot of value too, and doing work that wasn't fun all the time. So my college friends and I still laugh because I would recruit them like, hey, we have a warehouse job, and we had to do so many jobs that were just
Look different for you guys.
Yeah, they weren't fun, but we laugh about it. We had so much connection just from being together. So I just learned a lot of things about what it actually meant to own a business, specifically as a woman, and more specifically as a person, a mom who's balancing a husband and kids and a business, two businesses, eventually hiring people, that whole process of having employees as a business owner and the struggles that come with that, the joys that come with that, all of it. I think it is, as I've thought about what drives me to be here, there's a lot of things that I've shared on a personal level, but I also think there has to be a piece of really wanting to focus on specifically female entrepreneurs and female business owners, because it is just a little bit different for someone to balance all of those things than it is for maybe a man who is single and doesn't have to balance all of those things.
A man, and it's okay to be rude in the workforce, but
Right.
God forbid a woman does it.
Right.
And it's a different word.
Yeah. And I will say too, I also got to watch my dad. So not to just bash the men today. My dad was a good partner for her in terms of if she needed that assertive person, if they had to have a conversation with an employee, he was better at that. So they showed a good partnership. And my mom owned the business. She was, the president, CEO, whatever you would call it. But my dad always supported that and balanced the things that were not necessarily what I would call her zone of genius were his. And so them being together and being married, I'm sure brought things, but I also did see how my dad was able to pick up where it was harder for her. So that was valuable as well.
Absolutely.
And speaks to what you just said. I do think men are just taught to be more assertive.
Yeah. Well, but in that work relationship, that also is healthy in a marriage too, because, everybody has their strengths and everybody has their weaknesses. So, that's a healthy thing.
Yeah, and it's not 50-50. It wasn't 50% your mom, 50% your dad. It's 100% your mom, 100% of your dad, and then sometimes that percentages needs to fill in when someone's doing 80% that day. The other person might need to pick it up, and that's just how you said that healthy balance of watching them fill in where the other person has a different word that I love. You said zone of genius. So, yeah, no men bashing, but we can speak from our experiences of how we can't speak for the men's experience, so we got to speak for the woman's.
Yeah.
What advice would you give women who are trying to pursue their passions while managing demands of work, family, and life?
I really do think it takes figuring out what are the core whys, what is the why behind it, and what values really are there. Because once you start to stray from that, once you stray from that kind of core place, it's harder to set boundaries or to keep boundaries. That's where the overwhelm and the stress can start to creep in because you've kind of let go of those values. So I think that's key. And also making sure you create consistent space to be intentional. So what is going well with this? What is not going so well? And how do I do more of what is working and start to shift away from the things that aren't working? So I think you have to create intentional space. You have to create intentional space to process that, because what you're doing is generating data. And when you look at your data or think through data, you can make change that's actually going to be helpful. So I think where people in general get lost is they don't set aside the time to really think through moving in the direction of what's working, continue. How do I keep doing that? And how do I shift when it's not? Because if you're just going about your day, but that by day without any kind of thought or intentionality or data that you've gotten as you've failed forward, you're just not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. I love the word intentionality. We've said that a lot this episode, and I just think it's so powerful. And what you said, auditing kind of your goals. You know, kids get grades when they turn stuff in. At work, you kind of get a report of a review of what you're doing. And if you set these goals and they weren't intentional, you just kind of threw them up against the wall. And since if the goal wasn't intentional, how did you put behaviors and actions in place that were intentional to meet those goals? And then how are you going to know how those goals are doing if you don't go and audit those goals? And I think that can work with your emotional stuff, that can work with your physical stuff, that can work with you, because if you're not tracking how much you weigh or how many reps you do, how do you know if you're getting better? Like that can probably work in every aspect of your life, being intentional and then going back and auditing your goals and your behaviors and actions. I think that's perfect.
I think a lot of women, I mean, like me, sometimes I think, okay, when am I going to have time to think about me? Like, Jill, you may be able to speak more on this, but sometimes it's just waking up before the kids or laying in bed before you get up and just thinking about this, or before you go to sleep. Like our first class you did, my time to do what I needed to do was while I was laying in bed right before I slept. And it was my deep breathing and praying before I go to bed, and developing the habit. But it's like during the day, nothing's going to happen for me. But it was at night. So I think that it could be while the kids are taking a nap.
Yeah, that's so true. And that can be the hardest part, right? So if I was coaching you, your first baby step might be that. It might not be anything but where do you think you're going to have the time? Let's try to let's write the data. So, okay, next time we meet, how many times did you do it? Was it what worked? What didn't work? If you did it no times in 2 weeks, then okay, maybe that wasn't the right choice. And so a lot of change and moving is to just be okay with that. I may have picked the wrong thing. Now I know that time of day doesn't work. Let me try something else that feels like it will. And also having people around you that will support that. And I will say, like, if I look back, there are times in my life I'm like, I don't have a freaking minute. I don't have time to go to the bathroom with these kids. So it can be really hard. So it's figuring out what does it even look like to be intentional and where in the day, especially if you're just at that phase of life, different phases of life where it feels impossible. How do I do it? Right. And having someone kind of work with you through that can be helpful.
Yep.
I think just finding out, what it is for you, like you said, it might be for someone. Every day I put on, it sounds silly, but I think people try to think too big. Every morning I make sure before I rush out the door with no makeup, my hair's not done, the kids are doing a million things, I put on my favorite lip gloss. Like that is something for you get to do. When you're running through McDonald's or wherever to get something on the way to a travel sport, stop and get yourself the coffee, like little things like that. Just I want to change the way, women or moms think that they can't do something for themselves, even if it's something so small. Find what it is, and even if it looks silly to someone on the outside, every day when you do it, it makes you feel better. I want that thought around that to kind of change, because I've just heard it from so many women who have had babies lately or have kids and see that struggle. It's just so sad that I know so many women put themselves last, but then never find time to stop putting themselves last. I have no kids, so it's an outside perspective. I know it's so much easier said than done, but just reminding people you're doing good today. And if it doesn't look like everyone else is good today, that's fine.
Yeah.
So true. So let's wrap this up. This last question, what's the one thing you wish more people understood about stress management and recovery, especially in today's fast-paced world?
Yeah.
And also people that, there's people out there that they're good, and they can't see that that how can anybody have a problem? Like that's not real. We're good. So what do you think people need to understand about it?
You guys are asking some hard questions today, but
we're pretty hard hitting. It's what we do here, Jill. Okay.
Honestly, I think what I would say is that I've already said it looks different for everyone, but I think it's remembering that there are so many ways really to manage your stress and to recover from stress. It really matches up with your dimensions of health. For some people, there are things that are physical that are going to help them um, very quickly recover from stress. So I'll give you an example. For me, that is one of my go-tos. If I'm heavy lifting specifically, or in a heated, like a hot yoga or a heated space, even in my garage in the summer, for whatever reason, that just gets it out of my body more quickly than anything else. So for some people, stress management recovery is going to be in movement. And in fact, I'd say most people, movement is a big medicine because there's a strong connection between your physical and your mental health. For other people's, it could be nature. It could be like bigger picture, right? So let me sit out in nature and just close my eyes, or let me just swing on a swing. But it's specifically,
it takes you back to that childhood rocking, I think, and just immediately brings you down. I love swinging. I'm very upset that those cradle things that they put babies in on a timer to swing, they don't make adult one of those. If someone has an idea, I'm gonna this is mine right now, but I need you to make it because I would buy that bad boy.
Yeah. For some people, it's journaling, it's praying, we talked earlier about eating mindfully, just kind of slowing down how you eat. There's just so many practices that you could use. So really thinking through, like, what are all the things I think about when I think about my health, and what are the things I know help me? Nutrition, when I think about the dimensions of health, the spiritual side of it, what helps you there? What else comes to mind for me? For some people, being around people is a recovery practices. For other people like me, no, thank you. Let me be by myself
on the couch
recover.
alone, no peoples.
So knowing like socially what helps.
How can people learn more and connect with you on your deeper health coaching to get more resources, to talk to you about potentially what that would look like for them? That might be their first step in doing something for themselves, is having that coaching experience. So where can people find that out and learn more about you?
So I would say social's a great way. So on Facebook, Deeper Health Coaching. On Instagram, I think it's deeper_health_coaching. And then if anyone wants to do a consultation just to dive a little more deeply into needs or wants in terms of making change or having support, I have a Calendly. I think it's calendly.com/deeperhealthcoaching. So yeah, those are all the places I'm at.
Awesome. Yeah, we will definitely make sure all those links get shared. So,
okay, great.
Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Stay connected with us on social media, and we want to hear from you. Let us know what you learned from today's episode and who you'd like to hear from next. Use the hashtag KickItUpANotchPodcast. And until next time, let's all keep working together to kick it up a notch in everything that we do.
Kiddos who may need some extra support. There's just so.
Thanks for tuning in to Kick It Up a Notch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Until next time, keep reaching higher and kicking it up a notch.